New camera day is here at last, and this is the PYXIS 12K. I'm going to be doing some tests of it over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of those projects and how I've been finding using the camera. I'm going to give it a little bit of a peek now, have a look inside, and then I'm going to run some tests because I am curious to see if the 2TB Wise CF Express Type B cards that I've got are going to be sufficient to handle all of the frame rates and data rates that this camera is capable of. I know that on the currently checked off list that Blackmagic have on the website, the Wise 1TB CF Express Type B cards do meet that standard, but I'm curious about my 2TB card, so that's the first test I'm going to do, pointing them at the screen at a bit of like, I don't know, noise or something, so it's constantly changing, and then basically see if it's able to keep writing that at all of those different settings. So in the box you get the normal kind of things. You've got your copy of DaVinci Resolve Studio just there, little handbook, stickers. I've never actually seen anyone have those stickers on anything, but they do come in there. Then we have, very similar to the Pixus 6K, this sort of side plate style thing, which you can use to put your phone in if you want. If you want to put your phone in there and use that to then broadcast proxies up to the cloud, or you can put your SSD into that. So you've got a quick, easy way of mounting that to the side of your camera. Now the actual camera itself, just in here, let's take a little quick look with the other iPhone just there. Well, that is nestled in there, and nothing really too surprising. This is what the 12K looks like, very much actually what the 6K looked like in fact. It is box camera, it shares exactly the same form factor as far as I'm aware with the 6K. So in theory, it should be possible to use all of the accessories that I've got for my 6K with the 12K just here. I don't think that there's any major changes to the body shape. So that means that all of my cages, all of my other accessories that I've got, batteries, all of that kind of thing, will work with this. So I can use the same connectors, I can use the same, time code. It's still on the BNC style thing just there, and it's still CF Express Type B cards. So yeah, I don't think there's too much to talk about with the form factor. I am curious as to whether inside there's any changes with regards to the thermals and the cooling and all of that, because clearly the 12K sensor is going to be a little bit more intensive in terms of its requirements for cooling and airflow and all of that. But to be honest, the Pixus body, in terms of cameras, think about cameras for a minute. We have cameras from the likes of Sony and Canon, and very rarely do they have as much clear airflow as Blackmagic cameras tend to have. Certainly on the Pixus and the Ursa lines that I've used a lot, you can see practically through. In fact, you can actually see through parts of the camera just there, just looking through it. So there's a lot of airflow through, big vents on top, and then tons of heat sinks and obviously the fans in there as well. So I'm not too concerned, if I'm honest, about whether this will be capable of working under sustained load at higher temperatures. I would be a little bit more concerned if it was a smaller form factor, say the pocket form factors, because those can get very hot and it's a much more compact body, and there's less opportunity for the heat to dissipate, because obviously here we have that metal frame that's going to help radiate the heat out. On the pocket cameras it was more plastic, so obviously that helps to insulate things a little bit more. So right now I'm going to go on to the tests. This is what those tests look like. I've rigged up the Pixus just here, and on the screen behind me and on the screen in front of me I have a load of just static noise. What I'm going to do is power this on for the first time. Hopefully it works. I've got it plugged into a V-mount battery down here. All of my BP AU, whichever it is, batteries aren't charged because I generally don't use them for the Pixus, and yeah, it was just easier to put this in with a V-mount attached to the tripod. Now I'm going to I'm going to feed in this CF Express Type B card just here, 2TB. That's interesting actually. This is reading things from a project which was shot on the Pixus 6K. That could actually be helpful, because if you've got both cameras and you load up a card and you're not sure what's on it, being able to see the files without loading it into a computer is actually quite handy. Formats. Still on my Canon FDs, although I am looking at a few other lens options as well. Canon FDs I love, they're great, they're small, but if I had a PL mount lens system, it might be a tiny bit bigger, but it would afford me the opportunity to put some filters behind the lens. So having some kind of vari-ND on a lot of shoots, it might actually be really, really handy, especially run and gun stuff. I'm going over to Ireland in a few weeks for a sort of food documentary shoot, and that setup would be really handy in that environment. But I'm still a little bit on the fence. We'll see how that goes. So now I've got the lens on, we'll turn this camera back on. My rationale with this is that because the noise on the screen is constantly in motion just here, it will mean that it is constantly having to write new data. 12K 3:2, that is the open gate, and then 18:1, give it its best chance, and we are set to the highest frame rate that we can for those settings, and I'm gonna hit record. And hopefully it just records and we don't get any overruns, and it doesn't stop, we don't get any drop frames, all of that kind of thing. So with this, it could be that you write for a minute or two and it takes it a while to get to the point where it actually comes across an error. Also with cards, sometimes when the card is more full, you can hit those errors as well. So this won't be an exhaustive test, but once I hit, about a minute of that, I think that I'm done with that. I don't think we're going to have a problem in 12:1, and I don't think we're going to have a problem in 8:1. Let's go straight for 3:1 because I don't want this to be like a dull video of me just hitting record. Now, if this can write at 3:1 on the open gate at 40 frames onto those cards, I'm going to say that for most of the things that I'm ever going to want to do, because I generally don't write 3:1, especially on something longer form, I'm going to say that is absolutely fine for me. So I would say at the moment, those Wise CF Express Type B cards are feeling like a go for the kind of things that I want to be doing. We're at about a minute there. I think that is good. So I'm going to stop recording. And then finally, we're just going to go through, and rather than having, because at the moment we've got it on the constant bit rate, we go to constant quality and try Q0. Now, constant quality should actually be less data. Ultimately, I mean, it can write as much data, but I don't think it should be more than the constant bit rate, because the constant bit rate is constant, and I think that is the max bit rate that you're writing all the time. So the Q settings are intended to make better use of your storage when, over the course of a lot of recording, you might have periods where it doesn't need to be writing as much data, then it can just intelligently back off. That's my understanding of it. So I don't think this should prove too much, because the constant bitrate did not either. I have actually used these kinds of sensor before. So the difference between this and the 6K is that the 6K has a more traditional Bayer pattern sensor. Now what that means is that on a normal camera sensor, you have a grid of green and blue and red pixels. Now most cameras are going to have more green pixels than they do blue or red. It's just the way the grid has to work, so there tend to be more of those. Now all of those go to make up the image, and they go to make up the resolution of your camera. Suffice it to say, when a camera is actually 4K, for example, it isn't actually honest full fat 4K, because it's an amalgamation of all of those different pixels, different colors, that then sum together to give you the image. So when we say a 4K sensor, we're probably only kind of right in the sense that everyone just calls it that, so we accept it as that, but it isn't actually genuinely 4K. So that's when oversampling comes in. So if you oversample from a higher resolution sensor and then bring it down, then you probably are getting closer to, say, 4K. If you're coming from an 8K sensor down to 4K, that is probably better. And indeed, cameras that do that have often performed very, very well. The oversampling, even if they never give you the option of going up to that higher resolution, they still perform better. This is going on just fine. I can't see any drop frames, so I'm going to stop it just there. It is kind of terrifying that at Q0, I've got 25, is that right? 25 minutes? 25 minutes of recording? That's a 2 terabyte card. Horrifying. Let's not do that. Let's not do that. So I would usually be in constant bit rate, and I'd usually be at 8:1 or 12:1 for most of the projects that I'm doing. Occasionally, yeah, I'll step down to 3:1. On the Pixus, I think we've also got 5:1, and on this we have 18:1, which has always been a thing on these 12K cameras. Now, I didn't explain what was different about the 12K sensor. 12K sensors are RGB, same as the Pixus 6K, WW. So they've got more pixels, but the pixels that they have are not just red, green, and blue. They have these white sensor pixels which allow it to detect variations in light and tone. And at 12K resolution, we're still not actually genuinely in the same as we're not getting a 4K image out of a 4K sensor, really. We're not getting a 12K image out of a 12K camera. But with everything that's going on in there, that WW part of the sensor, giving the image more dynamic range, better roll-off, all of these kind of things are what people claim the RGB WW sensor is going to give you. Now, you don't have to be at 12K to make use of that. So if we were going through and we wanted to jump to, let's see, 8K, for example, one of the nice things, again, about this camera and this sensor is when you change between the different resolutions, you don't actually change the sensor area. So on the 6K, if you want to go from 6K to 4K, you change the sensor area. You're literally saying, well, this measures 6K, and if you want to go 4K, well, we just measure out what is 4K and we give you that amount of sensor. On the 12K cameras with that RGB WW sensor, it doesn't do it like that. It will actually give you the whole sensor, the whole gate, and do that at different resolutions because it's able to, with Blackmagic RAW and the way that it integrates into DaVinci, it is able to sum that down to a different resolution. I've got to say the 9K gives you a different crop of those different aspect ratios, so that is something to be aware of. It's not the case on the 12K, the 8K and the 6K, but the 9K is the one that does that. So yes, if you are looking to downsize the sensor and get a little bit more zoom out of your zoom, then that's the one to use. And also then when you step through each of the different aspect ratios, it will also be doing that relative for each of those. And that means that, for example, now I am at, say, go to 3:1, 8K, I'm going to pump it up to 72 frames a second. Now I'm able to get 19 minutes at 72 frames a second, and we're at 8K. If I wanted to go down to 4K, and then I'm able to, actually, no, still capped at 72, but obviously I'm going to get a longer runtime on that. And at a normal frame rate, suppose we're not doing the off-speed thing, go to 24 frames a second, and suddenly at 4K I'm at 3 hours 42 minutes. So I've got tons and tons of record time on there at 4K. So if you're doing interviews or something like that, jumping down to 4K, you're going to get a lot of the benefits of the sensor. You're going to get a lot of the benefits that the RGB WW is giving you. You might find that it's not quite as sharp, or it's not quite as good in the highlights and the roll-off and all of that when you do step down to 4K. I haven't tested myself, but that's what I expect to experience. But you probably also find that in a controlled environment for a long interview, that is a much better way to go. You don't write nearly as much data, and you're able to make best use of your sensor size because you're not changing the crop. I'm going to take this out, do some tests with it, shoot a few projects, see how it feels, and in a couple of weeks' time, at the beginning of November, I'm also going to be doing a workshop with Blackmagic looking at workflows and RGB WW sensors and how I've been using this and the Pixus on my different projects. So you can come along to that as well. Stay tuned, I'll have more details when the details are confirmed. For now, thank you very much for watching. Any questions, anything you want me to look at in particular with this camera, drop them down below because I will be doing some experiments, so it'll be good to hear what is going to be interesting for people to know.